Hello, welcome to our philosophy chat show. Actually, this is a course really, of 10 parts, but I think it's much more fun to sit with my friend Shen, and I hope he asks the right questions of sort of philosophical things, and I hope that you will enjoy this chat. So say hello to Shen. He's going to do all the talking. No, not really. We're going to talk together.
Yes,
I hope.
We will.
So philosophy too.
Yeah, the last time we spoke about philosophy, we were talking about just basically the basics of philosophy, what it is, and how it relates to our lives. And so the next one now, I think, is, as we're doing philosophy too, I think it's more of the same, but branching off a little bit. So I think my first question would be, how does it relate to our lives now? Why philosophy?
Oh, that's a very good question. And the funny thing is that people think about philosophy as like, well, it's a really difficult subject. But actually, all of us have a philosophy. And why I think it's important to think about it and discuss it and work it through is because we don't think about my philosophy, we just live it. But actually our philosophy is affecting the way we live. And we've absorbed that philosophy from all sorts of areas of life.
Wow. So so we live philosophy. How do we identify it? I mean, it doesn't seem like a tangible thing, even though I know it, because it's kind of like what we believe, and how would we...
Well, yes, but what you believe affects how you live. It's your value system, the way you think things should be, and so on. And of course, the big question is, and some people have done my culture course, is how do we get culture, or how do we get our philosophy? Where does it come from? And I suppose we ought to ask the question, is my philosophy correct? Because if it's not correct, we could be living wrong. If it is correct, we could be living right. And so it's those interplay of things, and we all have them, and we all have a philosophy, even if we don't know it.
Yeah, so, okay, that's a good question. How do we know our philosophy is right?
Well, I guess the question is, we need to go back one step further and say, where did I get this philosophy from? I mean, some things in our current world make me slightly amused. I mean, unlike some people, I'm sure that you probably haven't bothered to read it, but I have bothered to read Richard Dawkins' books on the
God delusion.
The God delusion. Have you read it?
No, I haven't.
Well, I have. One of the funny things in there, which did make me laugh, is he argues, and it's not just Richard that does that. I've heard lots of his ilk who would use the same argument as to why we're here. It's part of his philosophy. Yeah. Right? Okay. Why are we here? What it's all about? And do you know what it's called?
Go on.
It's a theory. And the theory is called the Goldilocks theory. Now, when I first read it, I thought, how strange that a clever scientist would use a fairy story to explain the meaning of the universe. The Goldilocks theory basically says that if you are, we're just the right distance from the sun and the moon, and if we were too close, we'd fry, and if we were too far away, we'd freeze to death, so life couldn't exist. And that is the Goldilocks theory. It's all accident. Isn't it amazing? And of course, if you go a little bit further into his philosophy, the philosophy of the Big Bang theory, if it was a millisecond too slow, we wouldn't be here. If it was a millisecond too fast, we wouldn't be here. But of course, it's all accidental, and there's nothing there. And of course, if you think like that, that is going to affect the way you live. People don't really understand that, but our thinking... I always tell a story about, we switched offices. My car drove me to the wrong office for a whole week.
Wow.
I got out of the car and I parked it. It parked itself in the wrong place every day.
Week.
I got out of the car and said, "Listen, car, we don't work here anymore." But so you're reacting to a situation.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know what Richard Dawkins thought about people like Hitler, and it's worth reading. I don't think you probably haven't read that either.
No.
He basically says, well, perhaps he was right.
Ooh, that's stepping on some serious ground there.
Yeah. So, but if you, I've always argued philosophically, if you think we are an accident, nothing has any purpose or point.
Yeah.
You know, if you think that we are living in a mechanical universe and we're just a cog in a wheel, or if you think we are really just an animal, maybe you'll just act like an animal.
Yeah. So what is his? Because I'm familiar with some of his work, and some of his work is based around humanistic ideologies and how we as humans are basically develop into this. We don't. The moral argument is missing from his point, and he denies that by literally saying, it's how we grew up and how it's what's the word? The Darwinism theory.
Yeah.
Darwinism.
Well,
yeah.
Yes, and I mean, if you push me, I have to say I don't know the answers to some of these things.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I do know, which of course people like Richard, actually, funnily enough, not Dawkins,
Darwin.
Yes, not Darwin. He wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
Maybe because he was frightened of his wife. But basically, he is there a God? And there's a quote in the course here of a guy who said, the reality is we cannot allow God into the equation. He doesn't exist. How people know that, I don't really know. It's a bit like the guy who flew into space and said, I've looked and there's no God. Laugh out loud.
Yeah.
It's kind of, this guy, Charles Letwin, he said, our worldview must not allow any space for God, even if it's sort of feels wrong. We have to, So it's a philosophy, And that will affect the way that you live. I mean, one of the things that I quoted in my culture course is there's the guy who shot all the kids in the school.
Yeah.
In his diary, he put, there is no reality, it's just maths.
Wow.
So people think that your thinking doesn't affect your actions. All actions start in the head, even driving the car to the wrong place. But it all starts in our thinking. And if our thinking is wrong, or we have a philosophy of life that is wrong, that's going to affect our actions. So from a humanistic point of view, which is what you were talking about, the reality is that that will affect the way I regard people and treat people. And, if I think, actually, I don't like this guy, but he is made in the image of God, that will change my attitude to that person, and it will change the way that I treat that person. I ought to, if I really believe that, and if that's part of my philosophy, I ought to treat everybody with respect. They're an image of God, for goodness sake. That changes my thinking. One of the things that I want to do in this course is to look at some of... I want to look at the philosophy of Francis Schaefer.
Right.
Now, I like his stuff. He argues that the things that go on in university are thinking that gradually affects all the way that we all think. I don't agree with everything he says, but there are some things that I think that Francis Schaefer did which you sort of go, hang on, this is a bit problematic. But his basic philosophy is, one of the quotes I've got here on my screen, he said, if we act according to biblical orthodoxy, without compassion, surely that's the most ugliest thing in the world, you know.
Well, what do you think about that point? Because people may bring up the Catholic Church and all of the Crusaders and all the Crusades, and really there wasn't much success when it comes onto the is that true?
Well, I think that, again, it's philosophical. I look at America at the moment. I'm ever so sorry to say this, but I look at some of what evangelical Christians are saying, and I go, I don't want to identify there because I'm looking at them and thinking, but that is terrible. That is a terrible way to treat people. Somebody said about the Bible, it's not the parts of the Bible that I don't understand that give me a problem. It's the parts that I do understand that give me a problem. You know, love your enemies. It's do good to those who do bad things to you. You know, you go, hang on a minute.
It all shapes our understanding and of what we believe.
Absolutely.
But
you see, belief actually is an action word. So we believe it and we do it. And our philosophy was, well, that's just philosophy. Actually, when I was in college doing philosophy, they came to the conclusion, the whole class came to the conclusion, that you couldn't even prove that you exist. So it's like, that was the end line. That was the finished article. We don't even know that we're really here.
Right. Yeah, there is I can't remember the exact name of it, but there is a theory that they have theories of they can't prove more than 2 minutes ago, or something. Which I've heard.
I've heard that one, but I'm not at all surprised.
I was listening to a podcast, and somebody was given a hypothesis like that, and saying, well, you can't prove 2 minutes ago. So anything beyond 2 minutes could have been created as it happens, and anything that was in the past.
And of course, there's all sorts of philosophies about alternative universes and so on. And it's like, and when you start to get into it, it goes on and on and on. But I keep coming back to the point that it's what we think and what we have absorbed, basically from our education, from our parents, from the environment we live in, the culture that we live in. All of those things are shaping our philosophy, but they're also shaping our actions. You know.
So would I be right in saying? So how could we get? Because it sounds like it's very cultural. It's like how you not just limited to culture, but you're based on what you have experienced.
Yes.
And so, if you have a bad experience, how much does that?
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
Affect your philosophy? Because some people will say, "I've had a really bad experience, and I will never let that happen to my children or happen to me ever again." And there's some people who've had a bad experience and have not really moved on, but yet seem to repeat the same actions again, and it becomes a reciprocal cycle going round and round and round. How could one? Well, first of all, how can one avoid that? Number one, and number two, how can somebody else try and convince you that is not, that their philosophy is wrong, or maybe not in the conventional way that everybody would understand?
I think that most of us really don't think. we just live. So my big question would be, we need to ask, and it's hard to do, but we need to ask ourselves, why do I think like this? What is my philosophy? Where did I get it from? Is it correct? And we need to live dangerously enough to challenge ourselves on, well, this is what I was taught, but is it really true?
Right?
Is it right?
Is it correct?
And I mean, I always laugh particularly on things like Facebook, when people say, "But the facts are," and I go, "Nah."
Is it really?
"Yes, but I've got somebody else who's saying the same thing about that, and their facts are different, and yet they're seeing the same thing." You know, so often what we call facts are really my perspective, which is coming from my philosophy and my inner belief and my presuppositions, and my preconceptions, and they might be right, but then again they might be wrong, and and we don't. I remember when I went to college that to me that was quite a painful experience, because I'd been brought up in a certain way and taught certain things, and suddenly I was surrounded by people who challenged. Well, you can't challenge that. That's how I was brought up. But then you start to ask the questions, and you start to go, hang on a minute, that's wrong. Even though you'd been taught it and lived by it for a period of time, you go, but that is not correct, and you put it on one side, and then you find another part that you were taught, you think, no, they're wrong. This is correct. This is right. And it's that self-examination and that willingness to ask ourselves the question, where did I get my philosophy from? What is it? But we don't do that usually. We just live, you know, day to day. I mean, years ago I used to say, if people start to think, why am I here? What's the purpose? Where am I going? What's the point of it? Then we start to come to some conclusions, I think. Maybe that's my philosophy, but I mean, now I'm a little bit older than some people around, but nowadays you watch people that are always listening to something. When I was younger, we didn't have Walkmans. That dates me. or things that you stuck in your ears and listened to something all the time. But I used to go to clubs in those days, and you only could talk when they changed the record. Because the volume was, you could shout and you wouldn't hear the person next to you at all. However, I remember as a young, I don't know, 16, 17, 18-year-old, saying to people, why do you live listening to this music this loud? Do you know what they told me?
Why?
I don't want to think.
Okay.
I don't want to think. And I don't know, I you know, you ask young people today, why are you constant? Well, it's just, I don't have to think while I'm doing that. And that's a bit of a tragedy, really.
So it's escapism, but not necessarily in a good way. Normally, people will escape into books. I mean, you pick up a good book, and then your imagination would run wild because, oh my gosh, imagine that, imagine this. Now people are, I think society is moving in such a way that we are, you're right, geared not to think. So
well, we watch television, I suppose. So why it's you're right. The word that you've used, the right word. It's escapism. Well, I'd like to be a bit real. I want to know why am I here? What's the purpose? Where am I going? What maybe I can't find the answers to all those things, but at least I need to ask the questions.
But the one of the things I think also is that those who are looking for something, you've got people like Richard Dawkins with his philosophy and point of view and theory, nothing that's necessarily concrete, and is shaping ideologies of others, young people. And I mean, we've got some other great thinkers and who think more, I think, akin to us, like Jordan Peterson, and all those. But you know, before he came along, it was a lot. There were a lot that that opposing idea of nothing means anything, everything means nothing, was really beginning
which is of course where people come from. Why is suicide going? Well, if there's no purpose,
What
if there's nothing to live for? There's no reality, I mean, I have had discussions with Richard Dawkins for one of his television programs, and what makes me laugh, and it slightly irritates me, he would tell me what I believed and then tell me why I was wrong, and I think, but I didn't believe that anyway. You're knocking a straw man because I didn't believe what you're telling me I believe. The other thing I would say about Richard is I think he's an absolutely brilliant scientist. But when it comes to theology and maybe philosophy, maybe he needs to move out of the kindergarten. But that's probably being a bit rude. But because he constantly does that all the time. He tells you what you believe. You think, no, that's not what I believe. So his theology is very primary.
Right. So we were talking about you were talking about like
Francis.
Francis. Yeah. Francis.
I mean, I would like people, if they want to do the course with us, I'd like people to read some of Francis Schaefer's stuff. There's two books that they should read. One is a very thin one. It's called Escape from Reason. It's an old book now. And the other one is called The God Who Is There. And they really are philosophy and an examination of the philosophy of his time. And times have moved on. But, they lay a foundation of certain things. The reality is that philosophy, like all subjects, changes and moves. But yet we're still using some of those from the first century. We're still arguing about Plato and people like that, aren't we? So
we should actually, on our next encounter, speak about those philosophers and their belief system and what they believed. So that might be an interesting one to explore for part of it.
Well, I hope people enjoy our conversation, and maybe in the future we can do something online and lots more people can join in.
Please, let join us in the comments and comment if you'd like what we've done today, and we'll continue.
Thank you, Shen,
for
all your clever questions.
There's more to come. Thanks
for watching.
Thank you.